This afternoon we're going to start security, and these are the objectives. A lot of this, probably one of those been there, done that. Not a big deal because I have done that. You have done that because you've done Network Plus. We can look at these things. 15% down here. When we do these, define security concepts, threats, vulnerabilities, exploits, mitigation techniques. Describe security program elements, user awareness training, physical access control. Configure device access control using local passwords. We'll use local passwords in order to be able to get onto the system. Describe security password policies, elements such as management complexity, password alternatives, multi-factor authentication certificates, biometrics. Describe remote access and site-to-site VPNs. Configure and verify access control lists. Configure layer 2 security features, DHCP snooping, dynamic ARP inspection, and port security. We'll do those tomorrow. Differentiate authentication, authorization, and accounting. Describe wireless security concepts, WPA, WPA2, WPA3. We talked about that on Monday. Configure WLAN using WPA2 pre-shared key using the GUI, and that's what one of those labs was about. So the objectives here: security fundamentals, the concepts, threats, vulnerabilities, exploits, attackers, mitigation, AAA, authentication, authorization, and accounting, ACLs, access control lists, manage passwords, configure layer 2 security, remote access security, VPNs, and then troubleshoot security issues. So we'll get started with these and finish up tomorrow. These are some of the labs that are going to be there. Security, and we're all want to do know, be secure. So security is, what is security? And I think it's probably different perceptions to each individual, but being free from danger, be it in the network or be it in your home, you want to be free from danger. And it is the process that achieves that freedom. The things that we're going to do on the network are, we're going to use access control lists. We're going to use physical access control. We're going to use fencing. We're going to use virus detectors. We're going to use check for updates for the operating systems, for the holes that are in it. We're going to be sure that all the systems are up to date. In your house, you may put in a burglar alarm. You may lighting outside, different things that we're going to do, and we'll do the similar things when we do the physical security for the enterprise, for the building itself. A harm or a danger may come from one of two sources: direct action that's intended to inflict damage, and from indirect and unintentional action. And I think that maybe I didn't, but I think that I told you about the time that we inflicted our own issue at Roanoke by doing a lab and then somebody not completing the instructions. We were doing a DHCP lab. Pretty simple, straightforward lab. We were using virtual machines. Everybody was doing their DHCP server using different addresses so that they could get addresses from their own DHCP server. DHCP, remember, will only give an address on the network that it came from. So we had those going. Everybody did their DHCP lab, worked great. We were using the physical infrastructure for the college because it was convenient. It was late at night. Everybody that had an IP address, that needed an IP address, had an IP address, checked all of that. And then the lab got done. Everybody got DHCP configured successfully. Were able to give addresses to themselves. And it's time to shut down the machines. Turn off the DHCP. And in Windows, you can disable the scope, disable the server, and turn the computer off. Well, almost everybody did that. Everybody but one. The next morning, which means that a DHCP server is still running. The next morning, we came to work, and this was on the admin network. About half of the people got addresses that they could use, and about half of the people got denial of service addresses. So indirect and unintentional action, accidental actions. The one that I told you about where the network administrator got busy and forgot about the port that they had opened. So those things can happen to you. You just have to be alert for what's going on. Direct action intended to inflict damage, that's the thing that we worry about, think about, protect about. The indirect, unintentional actions are things that happen to us that, we didn't expect it to happen. We forgot about this. We forgot to check that sort of arrangement. These are things that, with the experience, you'll get to the point that you kind of get a feel for some of these things. You never get a feel for all of these things. Like the DHCP server, never even suspected that all of this, because they're all good students, that somebody hadn't shut down their machine. And we proved in that yes, you can use a DHCP server for a denial of service attack or a man-in-the-middle attack, because we did it. Security increases, convenience often decreases, and that is a lot of truth. There are a lot of truth. That is truth. That's one of the, I guess, the cornerstones, the whatever that we have, that as we increase security, we're generally going to decrease, as we increase convenience, we're going to decrease security. Anyhow, if it's secure, it's probably not going to be convenient, and if it's convenient, it's probably not going to be secure. The little graph here, the high convenience, low security, high security, low convenience that we're going to have in the conditions. The terms that are in and I think this is most of them, the terms that are in the objectives here, threats, vulnerabilities, exploits, mitigation techniques aren't here, but those are things that what we're going to do to prevent things here. So the risk, like any risk, is a chance of harm coming to an asset. When you live on the coast, there is a risk that you're going to be exposed to a hurricane. When you live in the Midwest, there is a risk that you're going to be exposed to a tornado. When you live in the northern parts of the country, there's a risk that you're going to have a snowstorm, a big snowstorm, a blizzard of some sort. So the risk is the chance of harm coming to an asset. If you drive, there's a risk that you're going to have an accident. And the way that you mitigate that risk is, you practice driving. You don't let 12-year-olds drive cars, those sorts of things. The threat is anything that can cause harm to an asset. Vulnerability is a weakness. And vulnerability, we talk about vulnerable persons, vulnerable people, vulnerable circumstances. So it's a weakness that an asset has against potential threats. And the vulnerabilities that we're going to worry about are vulnerabilities that can be exploited. The next thing down there, the exploit is to take advantage of a vulnerability. Just because there's a threat and a vulnerability doesn't mean that we're going to lose something. Doesn't mean that it can be exploited. There still has to be an exploit of some kind in order for somebody to take advantage of that. So the terminology that we have with these things. And this little image down here came from an older Security Plus. We have the risk here. The risk is the stolen cars, what I would say, but stolen something on the vehicle here, or the vehicle itself being stolen, the car going away. So we have this guy. The risk is the stolen rims, and then we have the threat here. The threat is the exploit, the loss of the rims, or the car is going to be the threat. The vulnerability here is a hole in the fence, something that we forgot to do, a hole in the firewall that we forgot to close, an anonymous FTP account. And the exploit here is to go through the fence, and then we have the thief here is going to be the threat agent, and the asset. We always have to have some asset in order to be able to do these things. If we don't have an asset, then what's the risk? If you don't have anything to steal, then nobody's going to steal it. They may still do damage. They may break into your house and thinking that there is something of value there, but we do need an asset in order to protect. An asset to protect. It's supposed to be an asset. Only an asset. The things that we don't want to do when we have this set up is if we have an asset that we want to protect and it's worth $5, we're not going to spend $100 protecting it. Sometimes people want to do that. And there actually may be times when that it would cost that much or you can't replace it. One of the things that I saw in a course a few days ago, the front end or tire alignment, front end alignment software. A lot of that's running on some really old software. It's not worth a whole lot to buy, but it's worth an awful lot to the individuals. Those that have lots of vulnerabilities. You have covered to run on XP. We had one in Roanoke. It was still running on DOS. He couldn't get off DOS. Kind of wanted to, but couldn't. Some of these things, the software in some of these shops are running on some really old softwares. ATMs, the ones where you get money, not asynchronous transfer mode. A lot of those are still running on XP because they can't move them up. The software doesn't work when they try to do that. So we have these elements that are part of our security. We'll go through this thing again. The threat, the possibility of a harmful event. Lots of different causes for that. An attack is an action taken to cause when we do this. Examples of threats: physical damage, loss of essential services, loss of information, technical failure. Loss of essential services is probably something that we don't think about a lot, that we should think about a lot. What would happen, and you guys have experienced a little bit, Justin had the issue with the power going off, internet going off, some issues over the cost, over the time that we do these things. And a note in here that's an issue, the one I was talking about in the medical field, isn't software support for equipment beyond XP, and that's true in a lot of cases. So how are we going to protect these things? Yes, Microsoft's not updating it. It is updating it for certain individuals that have a lot of equipment there, like the medical industry, have gone to them and said, you know, we need you keep. They're not updating it for the general public, but they are doing some updating on that. An attack and an exploit be almost the same thing. An attack is, well, they're related. An attack is when we're going to try to do something. An attack is an action taken to cause harm. An exploit is going to be a weakness. When we get the Windows updates, there's a whatever vulnerability that somebody could take advantage of. There are softwares that are available to find those vulnerabilities. And that's one of the things that we're going to want to do is just to do some scanning. What is available? What isn't available? Have we updated things? Let me go back to my little hokey picture here. The attack here, or the threat, would be, I'm going to steal the car. I'm going to steal the wheels. I'm going to steal the whatever, the asset that's available. The threat, I guess the execution of the threat is going to be the attack. The exploit, in this case, the exploit would be the vulnerability, the ability to get to the device. A vulnerability might be if somebody's stealing your car. The attack would be stealing the car. The vulnerability would be that you left the doors unlocked and the key in the ignition. That'd be a pretty big vulnerability. So the threat there would be anything that can cause harm to an asset or harm to us. The threat would be that somebody would steal the car. The attack would be somebody stole the car. The vulnerability would be that I made a mistake. I created my own vulnerability by leaving the doors unlocked and the ignition and the keys in the ignition, or the key fob laying in the console, something like that. Does that make sense on that question, Stefan? Makes sense. Okay. When we do those things. So the threat is the possibility of harm. The attack is the action taken to cause it. But back to loss of essential services. Loss of essential services is something that we may not pay enough attention to. We pay some attention to. We moved into a new building, and it was just fantastic. We had a big old diesel generator. Then we had a fire in the battery bank, and the big old diesel generator didn't work anymore. But over the summer, we had a lot of thunderstorms, an awful lot of thunderstorms, and it knocked out power multiple times. As long as we had that big old diesel generator and the battery bank, the power went out. We automatically shifted over to the batteries. The batteries started the diesel, and then it shifted to the diesel. We could stay online for a long time. If you're inside the building, you never knew that there was but there were lots of them. Got a little bit different when the batteries had the power, and then we couldn't use them anymore. But loss of essential services, loss of the internet. We're going back to some of you have lost sporadically over the course of the internet access. You've lost sporadically maybe power. I did a self-inflicted one that we talked about just before lunch, and you may or may not have noticed that I went away. I came back. Self-inflicted because I was working on rendering the videos that we did this morning, and the brand new updated much improved screencast decided that it could take 100% of the CPU or drive the CPU utilization up to 100%. Then there was no management of the software, of the application, of the app for Zoom. So Zoom decided that I couldn't talk to it, and they said, "Yeah, can't communicate anymore, so you're out of here." It shut me down. So different threats, intentional, unintentional, are going to happen to us. Different vulnerabilities. The problem in the IT world with vulnerabilities is we don't know what they all are, and we'll probably never know what they all are. New ones each time, and a lot of times when we get the updates create new vulnerabilities. The question that we have to answer is what's being threatened, and what's the cost of what's being threatened. Protecting asset security is the practice of protecting assets from anything that might do them harm. We protect our home with maybe, like I said, maybe an intrusion system, a burglar alarm. Probably going to have fire detectors, maybe motion detector, lighting around the house. Maybe you use lighting on all the time. Maybe a dog to bark. Those sorts of things. So the security, we're going to protect the assets. In the enterprise, we're going to use the digital assets to protect the assets. The first thing we got to figure out is what are we protecting? And how much is it? How much are we going to spend to protecting the database? Are you protecting private information? And in the chat here, the medical field, lots of things to protect in the medical field. It's really quite painful, the things that you have to go through with HIPAA in order to protect everybody's private information. What about payment card industry? That you're processing credit cards. All of those things have to be protected. And an asset can be anything of value to the organization. The biggest asset that we have that sometimes doesn't go on the list is the people. And that should be one of the first things that goes on the list of what we're going to protect and how we're going to protect them. The focus is typically going to be there on that third bullet. Focus is on sensitive data. That we're going to protect the data. We're going to protect the network. We're going to protect the information. And that is really important. Small businesses that lose their data, it's a really high percentage. I want to say somewhere around 90% of them don't survive 2 years. It's at least more than half don't survive 2 years after the loss of data. If you lose the data, you're a dentist or a doctor or an anybody out there. If you lose your appointment software, you lose your client list, what are you going to do? Because the data is the business. And what's being threatened, we're going to include the employees, the physical property, business relationships, a big one here. And in a perfect world, we have a closed system where everything is trusted. And we know that's not the case. We have a situation where most things are untrusted. I just had one of the IBM security things is the world of mistrust that we go on, and we have that. Trust no one, trust nothing is the approach that you really got to sort of take in the security world. Assume that everybody's trying to attack and that they have the ability to attack. We know that's not the case, but that can happen. But we don't have this perfect world. That is one of the issues with Windows, is it was developed in a trusting world. And NT4, which I know it's not great, but in NT4, when you installed it, it installed with everything going. Everything was open. Everything was installed. The web server was already there. Do you need a web server? Well, not really. So now Windows has finally gotten to the point that you got to add the services that you want. We're not going to make it easy. We're not going to install all of those services. So perfect world, closed system, everything's going to be trusted. Vulnerability is a weakness. What would be a vulnerability? The vulnerability we talked about this morning was that we left a port open. And the port open went to, unfortunately, FTP. And the other vulnerability was that we had an anonymous access through that. Failure of a security camera at a bank ATM, unpatched software. Incompetent and untrained users, and those are the untrained, and I don't like to call anybody incompetent, but untrained is a really big deal. That a lot of times the users don't know that they're doing. The unpatched software is a bigger problem than just that the vulnerability remains. In the unpatched software, what the hackers do is they'll take the patch, reverse engineer it, so now they know what the vulnerability is. What was the patch intended to protect? Scan for, OE operator error. Scan the system for updates, and you can do that. The version, how good is it? Where are we? What's the operating system? Just get a copy. If you haven't used Nmap, get ZenMap, which is the Windows version, the GUI version. It's a lot easier to use. It'll scan the system for you. It'll tell you what the patch level is. So now they have taken the patch, reverse engineered it. They know exactly what the patch was designed to fix. That's the vulnerability. They can now attack that vulnerability for the unpatched software. And I guess this is kind of an advertisement to update your systems when the updates come out. They delay enough as it is in order to do that. After we have the vulnerability, we got to have an exploit. We got to have some method to take advantage of that vulnerability. And some of these ransomware phishing's going on. I'll admit, I got in a hurry one time. I was the victim of a phishing attack. My own fault, not paying attention. Fortunately, I think it was a long time ago. One of the online accounts, and they were doing a good job of watching what was going on. They locked the account. Go through the prove who I am process to get it unlocked. SQL injection is structured query language, and there is, and I may have said this, if you want to play with some of these vulnerabilities, WebGoat, that's not the new name of it, and I'll see if I can find it on the break, is that intentionally insecure software. Actually, if you go back to, and I think most of you had the Security Plus, go back to your Security Plus book. There's a bunch of virtual machines links to get them at the front end, and I think that it is one of the ones that's there that you can download, and they are all VirtualBox virtual machines, but there are a number of virtual machines that have links in that book. And then SQL injection, and then exploit kits. SQL injection is the ability to send commands to a database server and get information out, like your credit card number, the passwords, the usernames, all sorts of things that can go there. So the ability to actually get something, we've got to have an attack. We got to have some way to do it, but the exploit would be part of the attack, and what we're going to attack is a vulnerability. I used to get people come into the Security Plus class, first thing is I'm gonna get me a buffer overflow. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. You can talk about that, but you still have to have the vulnerability to do that. Buffer overflows are code errors. In the coding, I think they say that there's one error for every 1,000 lines or 2,000 lines of codes, and then if you look at the operating system, Windows and now Linux also, they have somewhere around 50 million lines of code. So how many mistakes are in? There are going to be many. And what we've got to do is to be vigilant about what goes on in the monitoring. Back to this morning with SNMP. You can monitor a lot of what goes on with that. What kind of activity do you have? What kind of information are you getting from one to the other? I'll give you one and then we'll take a break. We used for a while, I didn't talk about it when we did DNS, but there is a DNS resolution service called OpenDNS, which is now owned by Cisco, that will monitor your own personal one. It's an open source. They do filtering. You can filter what goes on. Let me open it here real quick and show you. You may want, especially if you got kids, you may want to consider this thing. Cloud, what does it say? Cloud delivered enterprise security for this. And this is I'm going to show you, convenience is not secure. Okay, I'm convenient here. Probably not all that secure. It's cached. It's on this machine, but if somebody was able to get that information, I would have an issue. I can go in with stats, and where I was going with this is we were using this, and this shows me all of the lookups here for this, and this is actually just for today. And you'd be surprised how many lookups you get in a day when you do these things. We were using this, and we looked at it, and up here we had this, hundreds and hundreds of lookups for a site, and it was like, where is that? What's it doing? So we go to the internet, to Google, and look it up, and it says, hey, this site has been associated with, implied, whatever. Anyway, it may be related to child pornography. And that's when you really panic as a networker. What's going on here? As it wound up, there was some old file in somebody's home directory that kept going there to look up. They weren't doing anything. It was one of those, I really didn't mean to download this, but I did, sort of thing that you're going to experience in a lot of cases. But you can see all of the lookups. You want to see where your kids have been, you can do that. I can go in here to the settings, and again, you may have done this. This is my network, my IP72, and so now you know where to attack me. But you can go in here and filter out specific topic areas. This is open source. This continues to get updated on a regular basis. A couple of things that you probably adware. We want those to go away. The German Youth Protection was where this pornography, web spam, tasteless, park domains, these are the ones that we've got. There are a lot of others that are available there if you want to use it. And if you're getting a block on something that you always want to open, you can go down here and do a never block. Or if you got some that you want to always block, you can do an always block. Just a free, if you want to make an account to do something like that. I think it would be particularly useful. I had a son who grew up with the internet in the front end of the internet, and it was I wound up using a proxy server for him because they didn't have things like that. So I know that we haven't been going that long, and we'll look at some common attacks. And one of the common attacks is that we have the attacker here with the DHCP server. I already told you how I did it to myself. We did it to ourselves. The DHCP attacker here is going to send us the information. We've configured DHCP and the relay agent. The server, we have our own DHCP server. The attacker puts their DHCP server on. Remember in the DORA process that we'll respond to whichever server we get the offer from first. And do it. Tell the other one, oh, no, thank you very much. I really don't want your your address. So we can do that. We're going to have a configuration on a switch tomorrow we'll do. That's DHCP snooping. That will allow us to prevent this, to keep the hacker off. Some more configurations that we're going to be able to do on switches in order to protect the network when we do these things. The SYN attack, the buffers that do the establishment of connections are relatively small. And we have, to start up TCP, we have the SYN, the SYN-ACK, and then the ACK. Well, this is showing that the attacker sends the SYN message. Okay, I want to have a conversation, source and destination IP address, the ports and all the other stuff. We send the SYN-ACK, and he just sits there. So when he just sits there, down here on the right, the TCP connections, we keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. You notice they're all the same one, but we keep going, and finally the buffer for connections gets full. Was never intended to hold a lot of information, so now we have a denial of service attack. Nobody else can get to the server. Firewalls typically can be configured, and this is known as a half-open connection. Firewall may go ahead and complete that connection to the server. It'll then wait for the other command, the other ACK in the three-way handshake. If it doesn't happen, it'll drop the connection. If it does, then it just hands that connection off to the server. So firewalls can help us again a lot with the configuration of some of these things. Reflection attack, and this is like a spoofed address but with more responders. What we'll do with a spoofed address, and what we will do here is all of these guys they're all attacking a victim. What we'll do with a spoofed attack is we will ping maybe a ping, and ping is the easiest thing to see, the broadcast address. And we'll have a bunch of machines out here in the broadcast address. We'll spoof the source IP. And so that means that in the spoofed addresses, and they say, oh, this is really cool, we're going to do spoofed addresses, the answer is always going to go back to the IP address that's spoofed. And what's going to happen here is we send the ping out to all of the broadcast network. The answer is going to go back to the IP address that is in the spoofed packet. So it can be used for a denial of service attack to do these things. So in this one we have masters and agents, and then we have reflectors. It's just that, a friend who tells a friend, who tells three friends, who tells three more friends, who tells three more friends. Pretty soon, it becomes a really big attack on the victim. And these are going to be, again, denial of service attacks. Man-in-the-middle attack, a couple of ways to do that. One is with that DHCP server that we saw in the earlier slide. The other one here is the ARP message. Remember, ARP is a not real smart protocol. And ARP will take and answer the ARP reply message here, R-E-P-L-Y. ARP reply here says that I can say that my address, let's say the MAC address of the gateway is 0172ABCD 1 2 3. Need two more, huh? CD EF 00. So what I do is tell all with an ARP reply to all of the workstations that my MAC address, my MAC, not the MAC of the default gateway, but my MAC is the 192.168.1.1, the gateway IP. So now they're going to put in their gateway IP MAC address. All of the information is now going to come through me. The ARP request here, who has 198.58.10.100. The server here, 0.0.0.222, whatever. But anyhow, the ARP reply, this guy's going to come back first and say, hey, 192.168.100.10, who has this, is 00 AAA to do these things. So what we're going to do is to substitute our IP address for the MAC address, remembering that the MAC address is used for local connectivity. Who has? I think that he just done his own thing. What we want to do is tell the system that we're at a significant location to send things there. Maybe, you want to be a website where people would put in their credentials. So some of the spoofing attacks that are available: exhaust a system service, crash the target system, denial of service. Yep, that's what they're designed to do. Trick an unwitting accompless host to send traffic to a target, a reflection attack, or an amplification attack. Eavesdrop on traffic, going to be a man-in-the-middle attack, or modify traffic passing through would be a man-in-the-middle attack. The attackers are going to have different skill levels and different determinations, and this is an attempt to show that. I got a couple of these slides, but over here, the attacker sophistication on the vertical plane and the determination on the horizontal plane. How much do they have? The state-sponsored cyber warfare are going to have a high degree of sophistication and knowledge, as well as a high degree of determination. Organized crime, same way. Organized crime making money doing this. The state-sponsored is getting something for that. They're manipulating maybe citizens, maybe government agencies, wherever, but they're attacking, they're getting information, stealing information, revealing information, all the things that we have seen happen. Hacker collectives, same thing. Cyber terrorism, we're going to be there, and then hacktivism. All of those are going to be dedicated and probably knowledgeable. Next, how much a disgruntled ex-IT administrator, the knowledge or the degree of sophistication is going to be high there. Competitor, it's going to be relatively high. Disgruntled customer may or may not, and a disgruntled ex-employee, got them at the bottom of the sophistication. Depends on what kind of an ex-employee they are. If they're working in the typing pool, yep. If they're working as a router administrator or a server administrator, probably going to have a little bit higher degree of sophistication. And then we have the lone hacker, the hobbyist, the business partner, and the script kiddies. Script kiddies are that's probably what I am, but script kiddies, you find a script on the internet and use it to compromise something or to just be an irritant, maybe a denial of service or whatever else. They have very low these things. Next is going to be the malware or the insider, and then after that, the least is going to be the accidental discovery, and we're going to have that. This is kind of sort of the same thing, but we have the attacker sophistication and what has happened, and then the intruder knowledge, and this is the intruder knowledge required over the years. So we start out in the 80s when a hacker was not a dirty word. Hacker was somebody that had computer knowledge and was willing to share it. So we go down here, we start with password guessing, self-replicating code, password crackers that we had, exploiting known vulnerabilities, disabling audits, backdoors, hijacking sessions, burglaries, on up the line until we get up here to cybercrime and APT's Advanced Persistent Threats, Stuxnet, one of those things that, it's pretty sophisticated when you look at it. And then the intruder knowledge. How much do we have to have? In the beginning, you had to have a high level of knowledge. Now, not so much, because there are a lot of automated tools when we do that. And I don't know, you probably have read about Stuxnet. The rumor is, and no reason to disbelieve it, the U.S. and Israel got a number of Iranian control systems compromised with this virus. It only worked on a certain controller, and I forgot what it was. I talked to a guy here who was an engineer at work for one of the companies that built controllers for centrifuges. But what it would do was send back a signal to the management software, here we go, that said, hey, everything is running normally. At the same time, it was over speeding the centrifuge and burning it up. It did delay the Iranian nuclear program. This is, again, same thing, different format, different presentation here. The attack sophistication is increasing over time. Password guessing, self-replicating code, 80 to 85, 85 to 90, password crackers, exploiting known vulnerabilities, disabling audits, backdoors were put into things, and then the hijacking sessions, sweepers, sniffers, stealth diagnostics, packet spoofing, intruder toolkits, automated probes in the 90s, the late 90s, automated scans, denial of service attacks, distributed attacks, the early 2000s commercialization of hacking, blended attacks, mutable malware, phishing and farming, spear phishing, infrastructure, and then this obviously doesn't go to today, but persistent events, persistent threats, botnets, things that we still have. Converged attacks, cyber terrorism, organized crime, all of those things. Cyber terrorism, one of the reasons that cyber terrorists like to be cyber terrorists is you can do an awful lot of attacks from any place in the world. Some attacks you got to be physically located, not necessarily. So what we have for these guys is the intent, the attacker qualities, the intent. Some hackers want specific resources or information. I want your social security number, or I want your credit card number, or maybe I want your driver's license number. Intent here, and others will take whatever they can find. Others just want to deny service and destroy information. Some want to substitute things. And there are some odd things that happen. And this is kind of related, kind of not related. But the story goes that this individual, Mary Smith, was trying to get a job and kept getting turned down. Didn't know why. Had good work record, always there, had never been arrested, not even a traffic ticket, until she found out that her good friend Linda Jones had been picked up on a drunk drive, and goes and, what's your name? So that then gets put into the record. I'll give you, I had this happen in the Navy. We're doing a background investigation of BI bring up. NIS agent came and did his interview and went back, and the next morning at 8 o'clock he was in the office, closed all the doors, and said, "You ever been in the Air Force?" A burglary at an exchange, an Air Force exchange in Germany, had been put into the Air Force database under my Social Security number, that I had been the individual arrested and court-martialed for. Well, I wasn't, because I was in the Navy then. "Have you ever been in the Air Force?" He says, "No." But those kinds of things can happen and maybe in the attacker qualities, the intent and the ability to do things, and the sophistication of these things. Some are relatively inexperienced, others more subtle methods, and the resources. Some attackers, groups of working to a common cause, and others are going to be lone attackers for these things. Location, some things, physical proximity, some can be implemented any place in the world, the cyber attacks, and that's one of the reasons that cyber attacks are so popular. The target information, some attackers might know little about your organization, others might have critical information, the white box, black box, white box sort of thing. And then the notoriety, some of them just want recognition, that I did this. Did you see what I did? How I defaced that website, how I brought that website down, how I did this, how I did that. The mitigation techniques, and the one there at the top, training, is the big thing. Why is there so much phishing going on? So much phishing going on because somebody's clicking on that stuff. And somebody's giving away a lot of money clicking on that stuff, and a lot of information clicking on that stuff. So training is a big deal. Hardware and software upgrades and updates. Hardware, we can only do so much with devices to protect. Monitoring. Talked about this morning, SNMP. Monitoring different things. Processor utilization. Disk utilization. Disk utilization, when you think about it, if you have a device in the DMZ that is vulnerable simply because anybody can get to certain services on it. If you have a big hard drive with a lot of empty space, that's target. That is something that's desirable. Storage space, so that the guy in in Germany got plenty of space to put not only a movie, but a whole bunch of movies on there. So software upgrades. If we haven't done the upgrades, what was it designed to fix? And the bad guys are going to find that. Monitoring, what kind of activity is going on? CPU, data rates, all sorts of monitoring, physical monitoring also, physical security monitoring. Protect the organizational resources. We have security programs, identity and access management, and access control lists. Identity and access management, how are you going to get to resources? Blue Ridge, we had these badges that you waved in front of a sensor, and it would open doors that you were permitted to get into. Not everybody could go everywhere. IT could. Not everybody could go to all the floors on the elevator, for instance. Most of the people couldn't get to the basement. That's where we were, where the offices were, and the shops and those things were. And everybody liked to get there because it was a shortcut to the parking lot. Those things. And, people violate things for the dumbest reasons. To get to say 14 steps to the parking lot, I'm going to violate a security policy to do these things. Access control lists are one of the really powerful tools to mitigate what goes on, because we can control access to resources. Security programs, common mitigation techniques, and here, nothing new, I think, to you, the CIA confidentiality, integrity, and availability of these things. Confidentiality, that the information is accessible only by those authorized to have access to it. Integrity is what I sent is what you got. That's what hashes are all about, and comparing the hashes to those things. And availability, that the systems responsible for delivering, storing, processing information are accessible when required by the authorized users. Can I get to the resource? Common elements, user awareness and training, and then physical access to resources. Things that are pertinent in here. Physical access to resources. Physical access is a big deal. We're doing Cisco. You can change once you've practiced it a couple of times, you can change the password, reset the password on a Cisco router in under 5 minutes if you have physical access. If you don't have physical access, it becomes a whole lot bigger problem. So sometimes we need to do these. User awareness training, and the insert at the top is true. We can't approach users that way. We've got to approach users as, they want to do a good job. They just don't know how to do a good job. User awareness, biggest vulnerability, vulnerability, installing unauthorized devices, downloading and installing malicious software, using weak or non-existent passwords. And the weak and non-existent passwords are, I guess, one of the big killers that goes on. I had a guy who was doing an MCSE course, and we were using some password cracking to show that we could do it. As long as we were the administrator, we could do that. He said, I want to take this to work and see what kind of passwords my users are using. And he did, and he found out that they weren't so very good. What he can now do is go to the boss. It was an individually owned company. He can go to the boss and say, we got a password problem. I want to create a policy, update the policy to require stronger passwords, and do the technical controls in the server to extend to manage or to control what users can do with passwords, the sequencing and how long, reuse, those sorts of things. So they were able to negotiate and came up with yes, we'll have a stronger policy, but we won't require the passwords to be changed as often when we do those things. Downloading and installing malicious software. That can happen on purpose or inadvertently. We had a bunch of nurses who they would get softwares that they needed installed and wanted to try out. And they finally convinced us that, hey, you should let us be able to install our own software. We'll be very careful about it. We won't do anything nasty. Well, yeah, you believe that too. So, a few weeks later, these computers are just really awful. They're so slow they won't do anything. And you go run an antivirus on them or do a check on them, and we got all sorts of things. We got, shopping software we got viruses, we got all sorts of information on it or programs on it that shouldn't be there that were just simply bogging them down. So control of what you're doing with or what you're allowing your users to do is one of the multiple things. That periodic role-specific training on security issues. And role-specific is a big deal. The administrators in particular, you gotta remind them occasionally that you should only be an administrator, use your administrative authority when you're administering the network. We had an individual, an instructor, actually was a department head, who, and this was during the NetWare days, so it was a long time ago, and during the I Love You virus. Anyhow, he was, for whatever reason, had admin authority. And he loved being the admin, so he was always logged in as his admin and not as his. And he got an email from what appeared to be a legitimate email address from in the organization, and the headline was, I love you. He couldn't resist, wanted to know who loved him. So he opened the email and wiped out a whole bunch of the server. Role specific, what can each user do? What kind of damage can they do? What are the threats that you can bring to the organization? Level of training for each role, how much do we need? And a lot of that is how much damage can they do to the organization for these things. Delivery mechanism, how we're going to do it. It's going to be a demo, sit down with it one-on-one, videos, articles, whatever we're going to do, posters, different things to deliver the training for these things. And then how frequently is training going to be? Informal awareness information, these are where the posters would come up, newsletters, blogs, things that maybe you can create some interest in the users to do a little bit more investigation of what goes on. Post-training assessment, were we successful? Verify that the training was effective, identify the gaps, and then what do we need to change in the training? So the summary of human vulnerabilities, social engineering, exploits the human trust. Humans are basically trusting, whether we think we are or not. Social behavior. Phishing disguises a malicious invitation as a legitimate. Spear phishing targets a group of similar users. Whaling is going to go for the high-profile individuals. Vishing, voice calls. Smishing, SMS text messages. Farming, legitimate services to send users to a compromised site. And then a watering hole targets specific users who visit a compromised site. The key to the compromised site is it's got to be compromised. You've got to have the ability to compromise it. Physical access controls, some of the things that we'll look at here is a protection against physical threats. And the physical threats are, natural events, fire, flood, the things that we talked about a little bit earlier, hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, and flooding, deliberate or accidental events, and unauthorized access are things that we're going to need. Identify the threats and determine what the countermeasures are going to be. And the first thing that we got to do is, what are we trying to protect? What are we trying to protect? And I think, why are we trying to protect it? How much is it worth? What's it going to cost? What can we use to protect it? Determine the countermeasures, smoke detectors, fire suppression systems, CCTV, video monitoring, IP cameras, access control systems for buildings, security guards, limit the number of doors that are available, security guard roaming around, funnel everybody through a particular door to where they have to log in and be seen for those things. The physical security, we want to use barriers, and we want to use these to discourage the attack, delay the intruders. The objective is to delay the intruders for enough time to allow us to get ready to defend whatever the attack is for these things. The delay time needs to be longer than the response time. Detection controls, identify the intrusion as quickly as possible for these things. Plan, document, practice. And practice is the big deal here. We need to set up exercises to do all of these things. Intrusion response process, practice critical. Every second trying to decide what to do cuts into your delay time. And that's going to shift the advantage to the intruder. Facility location. And sometimes there's nothing we can do about that. We just have to adapt to the circumstance that we're in. But the location issues, what kind of crime is in the area? Disaster. Is it next to a river that floods every 6 months? What kind of utilities are available? What kind of backup utilities are available? Emergency services. How long is it going to take fire department to get there? What's the response from the ambulance? How far away is the nearest fire hydrant? Those kinds of things, emergency response and the location issues. Perimeters, fences and walls, we should have something like that. We had a new building we moved into. We had a really big fence with concertina wire on the top. Pretty secure, but can be kind of intimidating when you're trying to recruit students. So when you look at the physical barriers, what kind of an impression can they give to individuals? Various heights, sturdy. The K ratings are something that's used is what kind of pressure can they take? What kind of impact can they take? Can a car run into it and stop it? What about a truck? What about a pickup truck? What about a deuce and half? Those sorts of things. Sensors and cameras. And in the sensors and cameras, sometimes, you can have devices, dummy devices up. We had a guy that did that, would put one up, didn't ever hook it up, and told this individual that we're watching you to be sure that you're working, that you're actually doing your work, scared them to death. Sensors and cameras, what goes on with this thing, and the visibility. Visibility, primary factor here. Visibility, we like these nice hedges around the building. How high should they be? How far away? You want these to be, and around your house also, you want them to be to the point that a burglar can't hide behind them when we do those things. We need visibility of the resource. Now, visibility of the resource, and that could be through lighting, could be through the cameras, the CCTV, all sorts of things that would allow us to watch what's going on. Secure the doors and the windows. Walls from floor to ceiling. Lots of buildings have false overheads. What you want to be sure of, particularly in your knock, is that the walls go all the way from the floor, and if you have false deck plates, under the false deck plates to the ceiling, so that somebody can't just pop a tile out, crawl over the wall, be in the knock, and start stealing information from it to do these things. Visibility, lighting, and escape routes are going to be needed here. Part of the other location issues, the emergencies, a part of the location is going to be where your devices are located. Switches are sometimes in out-of-the-way places from one to the other. You need to have some visibility, out-of-the-way, infrequently visited places. We may have them in I found them in Blue Ridge. I found them all sorts of places. One of them was in a hot water heater closet. Found a router in an attic. Kind of interesting when it was like 120 degrees in the attic. Still running, Cisco router. Kind of an endorsement there, but what are we going to have in the visibility, and in the visibility, accessibility, lighting, escape routes. Escape routes need to be marked. People need to clearly know how to get out of the building in an emergency. Surveillance systems, night vision devices, night vision cameras for these things. Wireless cameras are hidden or motion sensitive. What are we going to have? And usually they're going to be motion sensitive, that the cameras will start recording when somebody's in the area, because otherwise you just have a lot of recorded disk space that has nothing going on in it, and it's difficult to find the action that you're looking for. Motion sensing cameras, they'll start the recording software whenever somebody enters the area. When everybody leaves the area, there's no motion there, then they'll stop recording. alarms and sensors, motion sensors in the buildings, window and door, pressure sensors. And the pressure sensors would be on like deck plates, somebody walking across someplace. Glass break sensor, somebody breaking a window to get into a situation, breaking a window back in the South 40s where nobody normally goes. Environmental controls, air conditioning and heat. We don't want a situation where it gets too hot or too cold. What I have heard a lot of people say is that if you're comfortable, your equipment's comfortable. If you're uncomfortable, your equipment's uncomfortable. We'll give specific temperature ranges, but generally what goes on and what kind of a backup. What happens if the AC system in the NOC fails? Yes, and it will. Do you have a backup? Do you have a portable AC that you can bring in there to cool it until it can be? This is, some of the physical security configuration that you might have, physical security look. We got a bunch of cameras here that are watching. I just thought that was a cool picture, so put it in there. Secure the entryways. What kind of locks are we going to use? Conventional locks, electronic locks, passcodes, ID badges, tokens, biometrics, and how are they going to fail? Fail secure or fail safe? What that means, fail open, fail closed. Are they going to fail locked or are they going to fail unlocked? Fail unlocked, people can get in and get out. Fail unlocked, people can get in and get out and steal stuff. Fail unlocked, people can get in and get out and put the fire out. Fail safe, lock the system. Fire department can't get in. Fire department can't get in, then, system burns up. We don't have to worry about it anymore. But nobody can get in to steal stuff. Most doors are going to have one-way egress available to them, and you want to be sure that's the case so that people don't get trapped into an area that you don't want them trapped in. Guards, we may have guards. A man trap or entry logging. A man trap is a situation, and you probably one of those been there, done that we have a door here, an area here, and a door here. When we open this door, go in here, and it closes, we're trapped in the middle here, and hence the name man trap. I've noticed that banks kinda have that. I don't know if they're really configured for that, but generally they've got outside doors to go into a little area, and then another set of doors to actually get into the lobby area to do that. So they kinda have a man trap that maybe they could trap the bank robber in there if we have some of those things. Entry logging, log them in and log them out so that at the end of the day we know who's still in the building when we do that. And you have to really pay attention. And in entry logging, we probably should have a badging system of some sort for that we're going to use to keep track of them. Securing equipment, the network hardware rooms, the NOC, the Network Operations Center, should be locked. A couple of things, and you sometimes have issues with that. You get in a hurry, you go out, you forget to close the door, you forget to lock the door if it's configured that way. One of the things that we finally did that I think makes sense is put a door closer on the door so that it always closes. Put one of the door locks, the door handles on that you have to have a key to open it. You can't unlock it from the back side, but you can always get out so that the door always stays closed and is always locked, keeping unwanted visitors out for them. Lock safes, wireless access points, and the wireless access points, where are we going to put them? We need to put them someplace to where they're not obvious and that users are not going to fool with them in a secure location. The network outlets and cables, where are they going to be? How are we going to configure them? We need to, the physical outlets, we may want to unplug them. 802.1x can help us out there. Shut down the ports that they go to can be available. Social engineering, and particularly the people that are exposed to the public, the receptionist is going to be the most vulnerable. Secretaries are going to be very vulnerable. People that may not be as technically adept as we would like for them to be. Those kinds of vulnerabilities. The temperature range, as we talked about, that again, generally, if you're comfortable, your equipment's comfortable, but temperature 64 to 80, humidity 40 to 60%. Electrostatic discharge is the enemy of the electronics. In winter, you know that when you walk around in the winter that you get shocked more on carpet. One of the hints, and this was from a long time ago, put a fabric softener, mix a little fabric softener in a spray bottle and spray it around. It will reduce the electrostatic charge and give you a nice smelling room at the same time. HVAC settings, do you turn them down at night? It probably should just be left alone from one or the other. If you have a big system, we're going to have cold aisles and hot aisles. Instead of putting the machines front to back, where we would have a machine here and the exhaust here, the fans here, and the machine here, and then the exhaust here, and the machine here, and the exhaust here, put the exhausts all facing in one direction, the hot aisle, and the cool air, the cold aisles, where the cool air is drawn into the devices. And then we can exhaust these things. Heat is an enemy, and it can be, if we get something very big, a real issue, and how to get rid of it. This is one of the areas that virtual machines actually help with. Fewer physical devices, more virtual devices, less heat. Sudden changes cause an issue. Sudden changes, then we're going to get condensation in the devices, and condensation again is not a good thing because we're going to create electrical shorts in the system. Sudden change here, you have a laptop, is always the story. A laptop in a cold day in the car, and then you bring it in. Don't turn it on immediately. Let it gradually warm up and get to room temperature before you. EMI shielding, electromagnetic interference shielding that we have here. EMI, electromagnetic, and RFI, radio frequency interference. All of these can cause issues with them. The sources that we're going to have, motors. Microwaves, big deal for the 2.4 gig wireless, HVAC, industrial equipment. All of these things cause issues, and this is one of the things that we have to take into consideration when we're looking at what kind of media are we going to systems. Are we going to use a fiber? We're going to use copper? We're going to use wireless? What is available? What can be used in the system? Protections, shielded cables, Faraday cage, Tempest standards. Tempest, I don't remember what it stands for, but Tempest is shielding on computers to keep them from transmitting over the air. Computers have to have an FCC approval because they do transmit. I had one time that had an FCC approval, but obviously they hadn't done a very good job checking it because it would interfere with the television, certain frequencies, when the computer was running to do these things. A couple of things here. This is representing Tempest down here, where the computer will actually transmit information that's in it, and if you have the proper equipment, you can actually receive that information. A Faraday cage is going to stop wireless, and that's what this is a Faraday cage to do that. Shielded cables, talked about that in cabling. The little container on the right is a Tempest certified server cabinet that we could use to keep all of the emanations, the broadcast of information from. Coordinating these things, and what we're going to do is consult the layout, compare the secure fire areas, the fire escape routes, fail open locks to enable safe escape, fail close for security, the things we talked about. Alarmed one-way emergency exit. Somebody goes out of the building with the push bar, it's going to set off an alarm so that we know that something's going on. People may be trying to, exfiltrate system. Exfiltrate usually data, but just thought I'd get the word in there. Separate alert systems for security and safety emergencies. Alert systems. At the university, we had an alert system that if we would go into lockdown, we had a system that sent a warning that automatically overrode everything that was on every monitor in the building to say that there was an emergency, and then lock the doors, close the blinds, turn the lights out, get away get away from visibility through the windows. We did have windows in the to do these things. A separate alert system for security and safety. Emergency, regularly conduct emergency drills with security employees, and also regularly conduct fire drills so that people know how to get out. People are the biggest investment that we have in the company. And coordinate safety drills with the security personnel. The security personnel drills, those are things that we do need know how to go from one to the other. So the next area that we have here is AAA, authentication, authorization, accounting. What we want to do is a common, say, AAA authentication is a security approach that verifies an entity's identity and assigns the appropriate permission. That's what we want to do. Who are you? I'm John Smith. Okay, that's correct. What's your username and password? How do I get there? One of the real issues that we have with our Cisco devices is their default that everybody's using the same password. So everybody's using the same password. We don't know who did what, when, where, how, any of the other things that go on with it. So we'll want to be able to configure some of these things, the identity and access management system, authentication, authorization, and accounting. Accounting is going to be the auditing. Authentication is when we prove who we are. Been there, done that, I'm sure of that. Use a challenge and response mechanism, usually a user ID and a password. 2 authentication types, local. Local uses the local database. And what I want to do, I'm going to bring this over here, and we'll do radius a little bit later, but right now we'll do local a little bit later too. But to get it, to be sure that we do it, if I want to configure this system so that you have to log in with a username and password, I can do that. Config T, and it's just username, Larry, and then I'll go here and I'll do a secret password. Secret's going to be just like the enable secret. I'm going to do secret so that I can remember it, and then I can do a carriage return here. I think I can do a privilege level here. It's privilege, password, privilege, secret. Let's do user, Larry, and I'm going to do privilege 15 so that when I log in, I'm automatically going to be into privilege exec mode. And then we'll do the secret. I have to go one step further. I have to now tell the system to use this local password. So let's go to linecon 0 and let's do login local, and if I've got that right, end, and we'll disable to get out of enable, spell it, Control-Shift-6 to break that. This is the one I was talking about. If we did a no IP domain lookup, I wouldn't get this. Looking for a domain server. Let's go to disable, spelled correctly, and then log out. Can't spell that either. Log out, and then it asks me for my username and password because I've specified the local database. Remote databases we'll do a little bit later when we do, a little bit later in this one. If we don't, we will tomorrow, or if we don't, we will on Friday. And then my password, and you notice it put me directly into, because I specified the privilege level, put me directly into privilege exec mode. This is what we're talking about. We can define the commands, the things that are available at the other privilege levels, and we can assign users privilege levels so that they can only do certain things on the network. Provide support for messaging and encryption based on the security that we're using, and uses a methods list. The methods list, I guess I'm going to have to do more than I thought I was going to have to do here. In a methods list, we would go in here and do an enable, and we're going to use a different way. We're going to use AAA new model. I think we're going to, in config mode, we'll do that. Big T, AAA new model, which says that now I can do other things. So I'll do AAA authentication, and then we can configure for, let's do for login, and then we can do default for, and default's everything else. Now we're finally getting to where I want to be. This is the methods list, and we could do like group radius, and then we could do local, and local case is a case sensitive username. We can do that, and then maybe we would do none here to do these things. This group here, this list, methods list, is the authentication method that we would use, and if one wasn't available, we go into the next one. The group here, the radius server, if the radius server isn't available, I'll use the local database. If neither one of them are usable, then I'll just use a none, or I could use the enable or whatever other methods might be available. But that's what a methods list is when you see it to do these things. Authorization. What can we do once we get authenticated? Authentication, authorization, and accounting. Authentication, who are you? Authorization, what can you do? Accounting, what did you do? It's a process of assembling a set of attributes that describe the actions the user is authorized to perform, providing suitable access. What can we do once we get authenticated? These things. It uses a associated attribute value pairs, AV pairs, with the authenticated user. That's what's going to download things like if we had the different privilege levels configured, it would download those along with the as the authorization if we had it. Remote access control is available for these things. Remote access control, we're going for remote access. We would use, to get there, obviously, Telnet SSH. Remote access control, remote access for authentication and authorization. We can use AAA, or we can use Radius or TACACS. One-time authorization or an authorization for each service. And this kind of goes back to Kerberos is a one-time authorization, gives us a ticket to do those things. Use a methods list for authorization as well as authentication. The methods list, same thing that we just saw for the authentication method. Methods list the different types of authentication and authorization to be performed. Defines a sequence in which they're to be used, and I did Radius server, group Radius, and then after that we would use the local database. After that I said none. Packet Tracer gives you 3. I really think that in real life we get 4 different methods that we can use to do those things. The default method list is applied to all the interfaces when another method is not specified. And when I did the AAA new model and did authentication and did that, it said default or word. I could have specified a different one. I specified default, which means that it's going to be, that's the process that we're going to use unless something else gets specified. We go back in and use the command again, and then use the particular word that we've specified on that interface. Default method, it allows a designation of one or more security protocols to be used. When we do that, we'll use the first method listed. If that method does not respond, not available, the next method is used. It's repeated until there's a successful communication, or if we run out of methods in the methods list, then we're out of luck. We can't get authenticated. That happens to us. And that's why none is probably a safe thing to put as the last one. It's not a big risk because that means that all the other methods aren't available. Accounting, what we did while we were on the system, collecting information and logging locally or sending to a AAA server for billing. It can be logged locally. The login local does not allow. So if we're using the local database or the local username and password login local, we can't use accounting for the maintains a log of every management session used to access the Cisco switches, and we talked about TACACS and Radius a little earlier and what it actually did log. Generates reports for troubleshooting and auditing. Track services, users access, and the network resources that are consumed. The network access server reports user activity to radius or TACACS, and again, it will not store it locally. For the local username and password, there is no accounting. Contains the AV pairs stored on the access control server, and all accounting methods can be defined only through AAA. AAA is radius and TACACS. Authentication, authorization, and accounting servers. Not available using the last topic, and then we'll have some labs that I want to do here, is access control list. It's not a real long set here. The main component of the Cisco access control. We're going to use access control list to control what can get where, what packets can, what IP addresses, what services can we access, what users can get on IP addresses. What can we do with these things? I kind of like to scrawl this one out a little bit. What we have in an access control list is we have two types. We have two types. I'm trying to write better. It's not working. Two types. And these are going to be standard. Standard is based on source IP and source IP only. The extended is source and destination IP as well as port number. So this is the one that we could permit or deny somebody to get to someplace else. We could allow people to get to port 80 or port 443 so that they can get to the web server, but nothing else. There are two ways to write these things. Two ways to write. And they can be numbered, and you've seen the numbered a couple of times, or it's really basic ones, and those were standard when we did the quality of service this morning. Permitted a specific IP address. And that is a source IP address was what we were using. They can be numbered or they can be named. The named are much easier to use, and I want to try to do a demo of each of these when we get down to them. Numbered or named. Named, and we can use something for what is it? What is it used for? So we can name them for things that are significant. It's an ordered list that we start at the top and move down for each statement, 1, 2, 3, 4, until we find something that applies. Find it applies, and then we do the old Nike, we just do it. And we don't look any farther. So the order becomes significant. We don't want to be too restrictive or too permissive at the top of the list. Order becomes a really big deal. At the end of it is what's called an implicit deny. An implicit deny. So we need at least one permit statement. If we don't have that permit statement, then we've just denied everything. So the implicit deny says that everything that wasn't permitted up here, we had an individual, and to show you that we have to have at least one permit statement, who was abusing their internet privileges. So pretty simple. Let's just go in and deny their IP address. So they go in and write an access control list, deny their IP address, and the other thing we have to do is after we write it, we have to apply it to an interface. Apply to the interface. So we did that, applied it to the interface, deny whatever the IP is, and hey, we're done. Apply to the interface, and everybody says, hey, the internet just went down. The internet just went down. And the internet just went down because we didn't have a permit. After we denied that one, we needed to have a permit, everybody else. And then after that, we're going to have the implicit deny. We'll do the implicit deny in a different color. We're going to have a deny all else. So we have to have at least one permit statement in the access control list work. So prettier than what I had, the access control list at the interface. We had the packet come in. Does it match statement 1? Yes. If it's a permit, go do it. If it's a no, goes to the next statement. No goes to the next statement until we get a yes. Or if we get to the bottom, when we get a no, the packet's going to be dropped because we have that implicit deny at the bottom of the list. That's always going to be there. That's going to deny everything that has not been permitted. A mechanism to use to control the flow of network traffic. Identify the traffic to permit or deny, and define a group of traffic and apply condition based on the criteria. Applied by the Cisco iOS using statements on a device interface, and then we're either an inbound or an outbound rule. And whether we're going to apply the list going into the interface or coming out of the interface. This confused me for years. Think about it as going onto the media or coming off of the media, whether it's going out of the interface or coming into the interface. Validate each packet and whether to block it or allow it. The types of access control list, the standard and the extended. The standard filtering decisions based on the source IP address. You can apply a standard IP access control list to deny access to a specific host or an entire network. And access control lists do use wildcard masks, the range of addresses that we would use for them. The extended other factors, source and destination address protocols, ports are going to be in that we can have a much more selective arrangement in the extended list than in the standard list. Can be numbered or named. Access list, and these are the numbers. It was easy in the old days, 1 to 99 and 100 to 199. Now we have 1 to 99 for the numbered standard list, and then 1300 to 1999. And we got a bunch of other numbers for all the other protocols that went away. 100 to 199 and 2000 to 2699 are going to be the numbers that are used for the extended. The reason these are significant, if I configure this thing access list 1, the system knows because of the number that it's a standard list, and it knows if I do the configuration of the standard list correctly. Access list 101, name list, editing features for inserting and deleting commands. What's going to happen in a named list, and we're going to look at each of these here in just a minute. In a named list, each of the statements gets numbered as we go down, and if we forgot something, we could go back in and put it in 15. The numbered lists, all of the statements, if I have a new statement, it's going to be added at the bottom. So the order becomes significant. Order is significant. They're much more difficult to edit. Hint, hint, you can copy and paste it into Notepad, make your edits in Notepad, copy from Notepad and paste it back into the router. Named lists, there's no reason to use numbered lists anymore because the named lists really are a whole lot easier to use, and you can name them based upon what you're using them for, which helps out a little bit when we do these things. The standard list, access list permit, the commands here, standard ACL, filters IPv4 packets matching the source IP address. The reason I'm not going to do that, I'm going to do a demo, and we'll look at how to write both the standard and the extended list. Each ACL comprises one entity, many lines of configuration, is enabled in one particular direction on an interface. We have to, once we write the access list, then we have to apply to the interface as either inbound or outbound. The extended, it is a more extensive list. We can specify source and destination IP address, extended, as well as port numbers. So we can specify services that are available to the individual. Kind of a little summary slide here for access control list. More specific rules need to go at the top. If I do like the deny the single IP address, that should be at the top, because if I permit everybody else before I deny it, that's going to be in the permit. The list is applied from the top down till it finds something that fits it, does that, and moves on, doesn't look at anything else. Got to have at least one permit statement, otherwise you've just denied everything because of that implicit deny. Once we write it, we have to apply it to the interface, and we can have one list per protocol, per interface, per direction. What I want to do, let me find it, is to do a demo of one of each. This one should work as long as I don't have any access lists on it. Check and see. The way we'll find out if we have access lists is to just use show access list. And there's none here. Good. So what I'm going to do after spanning tree gets done, 192.168.2.2, let me write that down because I can never remember these things. 192.168.2.2 is going to be the destination address when we get there. We said, and the first thing that I'll do is a standard list is going to apply only to the source IP address. These workstations are going to be the source addresses, and then we have to apply it to an interface. Let's deny 192.168.1.2 going out of this situation. So what I'm going to do in here, and we'll do one of each, T, and let's do access list 1, which would be the numbered. And then the next thing we have to do is a permit or deny. We can do a remark. Unless I wanted to deny that, didn't I? Deny 192.168.1.2. Unless should say host. We can use the word host, or we can use the wildcard mask 0.0.0.0, which checks all of the digits. So let's just do host 192.168.1.2. Now I need to do at least one permit statement. So let's permit, after we do that, permit. And you notice I have to write access list and the access list number, access list 1, access list every time that I do a statement. And let's do a permit any, so it's going to permit everything else. After that, I need to apply it. If I applied it on this interface going in, it certainly would stop it from going over here. But if I had other resources here, it would stop. So a standard list is applied closest to the destination. And if you've ever been to San Diego, and some of you may, it's got great weather, and that's the way I always remembered it. I had a ship out of San Diego at one time. So SD, standard destination, San Diego, to get there. So now I'm going to go in and apply the list. I guess the first thing the next thing, or before I apply the list, that I should do is to be sure that we can get there. So let's see if we can ping 2.2, which would be the easiest thing to do here. Ping 192.168.2, and yes, we can. So now we'll go to the closest to the destination interface, gig 00, and we'll apply it. So now let's go to interface gig 0/0, and we apply it with the access group. Let's try IP access group and not access group IP. And that's because at one time we had multiple protocols that we could have applied here. So now we just IP access group 1, which is the access control list that we have. And this said, I tried to enter, and it said incomplete command because we have to now tell it it's either inbound or outbound. This one's going to be outbound because it's going to go out of the router toward the server here. So let's see if we can do that. If we did it the wrong way, it's not going to do anything for us. It's just in or out, right? Out. So now then, I think 1.2 was the one that we denied, wasn't it? Let's see if we can get there, and we still can. So did I do that wrong? I guess I did that wrong, huh? Deny host 192.168.1.2. I think I put it in the right place. Gig 00 would be the wrong interface. Let's see, 192. Oh, no, it wouldn't either. 2.2 would be the correct interface. So IP address, IP access group 1 out. That's really odd. That's one that hasn't happened to me before. It's pinged it, and you let me ping it instead of 2.2. Ping 192.168.2.2. If you try the one that is actually supposed to go to, it works better. Destination host unreachable. So we can do that. The reason I did the show access lists again if we go into it now and use the show access lists, it tells me how many times that's been done, how many times it has happened. What I want to do now is to interface gig 00 config T. Let's take this off and do an extended list as a named list. This was a numbered list in the standard. Now let's do no IP access group 1 out, and let's do no access list 1 to get rid of all of that. So these guys, now I want to do an extended list, and this has got a web server running. Let's permit port 80 for 1.2, 80 for 1.2, and 443 for 1.3 to see if we can do that. The extended lists are applied closest to the source because we are very specific with them. Even if there were other resources up here, we're only going to permit or deny access to this single resource. Prevents us from having to do any processing of the packets that go into the system. To do an extended list, we do IP access list, and then standard or extended, and we'll do extended, and then we're going to name it, and let's do, we'll just call it web. Web for the name of it. And then after that, we just have the carriage return. Notice that it doesn't make me type access list every time. It goes into configure extended network access list. So in this one, let's permit, and then we can permit all of these things: EIGRP, ESP, TCP, UDP. Since we're going to use port numbers, I need to permit TCP, and then the source IP address, which will be host 192.168.1.2, and then we'll have the destination address, which is 192.168.2.2, and then we're going to have the port number here. We'll say equal 80, and then destination wildcard bits. So I need, see, so it got me. I need to specify this one will be a host also. If I do a host here, then it'll do equal 80 should work. And I'm just going to do a recall here, and because it's very similar, and go back here, 1.2, 1.3, and we'll do equal to 440 HTTPS port. Now then, on this one, I need to apply it inbound on this port here, which is gig 01. I had to go back and check. On it, we'll do config T, the interface gig 0/1, and IP access group. And here we can have a number or a word, and mine was what, web, I think, and inbound or outbound, and we'll do it inbound. So now then, let's see if 1.2 can get to the, we have a little web browser here, HTTP 192.168.2.2, and we get there. Just out of curiosity, since we have that deny all at the end, let's see if we can get to the HTTPS. And this one will take a little bit to go around and around, and let's see how long I can talk, but it should time out, and it does time out. So it has denied that one. So it can get to port 80. This guy, let's go in here and do him, the desktop. Let's do him to do the deny first, HTTP 192.168.2.2. I didn't get a dot in there, 2.2. And it should time out first, I hope. It's not going there, obviously, it timed out. Now then, let's go back and see if he can get to the secure HTTPS. And we can do that. So we've done both of the extended, the standard, the extended, a named, and a numbered list. And if I show access lists here, how many times did we get matches on these things? This is one of the good ways to do this. I got panicked on this one time. It was on the cert test. My very first question was to write an access control list. And I put in port 80 and I went to the show and it said www. I said, what are you doing to me? But www is port 80. Quick and dirty, an overview of how to write an access control list.